Wait, you're telling me humans don't have predators? Zix clicked his mandibles in disbelief, all 4 eyes fixed on the holographic display showing Earth's wildlife statistics. Not anymore, Sarah replied with a shrug, taking another sip of her coffee. I mean, historically, we had to deal with big cats, wolves, bears, but we kind of worked our way up the food chain. She couldn't help but smile at his reaction. But that's impossible. Zix chittered. Every sentient species evolved alongside apex predators that shaped their development. The VX had the crystal stalkers, the Wesherp had the tunnel worms, even the peaceful Ethery developed under threat from atmospheric leviathans. Sarah set down her coffee mug and leaned back in her chair, propping her feet up on the lab console, in a way that made Zix-Tall's exoskeleton bristle with mild disapproval. Oh, we definitely evolved alongside predators. We just decided we didn't want to be prey anymore. Decided? Zix's translator barely managed to convey his incredulity. One doesn't simply decide to stop being prey. Watch me. Sarah grinned, then immediately regretted her choice of words, as Zix's compound eyes began rapidly scanning her for signs of predatory adaptations. But you have no natural weapons, no venom, no claws. Your teeth are practically useless in combat, and your skin offers minimal protection. He paused, mandibles working furiously, as he processed this contradiction. By all biological metrics, you should be classified as a prey species. Before Sarah could respond, the lab's door slid open, with a soft hiss, revealing Captain Rodriguez. The normally stoic ship's commander had an unusually troubled expression on his face. Dr. Chun, Dr. Zix, he nodded to them both. We've received a rather unusual distress signal. I believe your expertise might be needed. Sarah's feet came off the console as she sat up straight. What kind of distress signal? One from a Cravenax hunter. Rodriguez's face darkened. They're requesting emergency extraction after a failed hunt on an unregistered garden world. Apparently, their target proved more challenging than anticipated. Zix's antennae went rigid. A Cravenax? Impossible. They're the galaxy's most accomplished predatory species. Nothing survives once they've chosen it as prey. Well, Rodriguez said grimly, this one encountered a human survey team. Sarah felt a familiar mix of concern and resignation wash over her. Oh boy, how bad is it? The Cravenax is alive, technically, but according to the medical data transmitted, they're suffering from multiple broken limbs, severe concussion, second-degree burns, and what appears to be, Rodriguez checked his datapad, psychological trauma from something they're describing as demons with fire sticks who wouldn't die properly. Zix's mandibles clacked rapidly. But Cravenax are nearly invulnerable. Their neural regeneration alone makes them practically impossible to incapacitate. Yeah, Sarah sighed, standing up and grabbing her lab coat. About that whole idea of humans being prey, the medical bay aboard the Curiosity was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate the treatment of countless alien species. At present, it housed a patient Sarah could only describe as a thoroughly defeated predator. The Cravenax, a towering figure even while lying down, measured nearly 3 meters in length. Its once lustrous, iridescent scales were tarnished with burns and hidden beneath layers of bandages. Its 6 limbs, immobilized in splints, were restrained unnecessarily. The creature's 8 glazed eyes, dulled by medication, followed Sarah and Zix as they entered. At last, it spoke, its translator conveying a pained rumble. Scientists, I beg you, explain. What are they? Sarah glanced at Zix, who was visibly brimming with curiosity, his earlier musings on human vulnerability replaced by fascination at the scene before him. Why don't you tell us what happened? Sarah asked, pulling out a chair and sitting down. The Cravenax quivered, its scales flickering faintly with what might have been shame. I am Crix, a hunt master. My record was flawless, 97 successful hunts across 32 systems. When I detected unusual life signs on an uncharted planet, I believed. It hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously. I believed it was my chance for glory. A new species to conquer, and you found humans, Sarah said, her tone laced with irony. No, Crix whispered with dread. I found nightmares. Go on, Sarah encouraged, her expression calm but intrigued. They seemed perfect, Crix said, trembling. Fragile, slow, unarmed. They were constructing some sort of research station in a valley. Following protocol, I disabled their equipment and separated one from the group. How many humans were there? Zix interjected, eagerly scribbling down notes. 5, Crix admitted. It should have been simple. I waited for their rest cycle, neutralized their power source, and chose the smallest one as my target. Sarah had a bad feeling. This small one, did she have red hair? Freckles? Yes, you know of her, Crix exclaimed, its mandibles twitching. That would be Dr. Clara Lee, Sarah said, sighing. She's a xenobotanist, about 5 5'2", 110 pounds, and a former member of Australian Special Forces. The Cravanax emitted a sound that the translator struggled to process. "Please," Sarah said, gesturing for it to continue. I followed all hunting procedures. Crix continued, voice unsteady. I cut off their communications, drove her away from her shelter, and pursued her into a canyon. Everything was under control until she shuddered. She smiled at me, and then she ran. "That's what prey does," Zix said, confused. "Not like this," Crix whispered. "She didn't run away. She ran up." "Humans are good climbers," Sarah explained. "Persistence hunters. And we're pretty inventive when the situation calls for it." She moved like liquid, flowing effortlessly over the rocks, always staying just beyond my reach, Crix recounted. "I thought I was steering her into a dead end, but it was the other way around. By the time I realized it, we were in a narrow canyon with towering walls. It was already too late." "Let me guess," Sarah interrupted. She had the high ground. "The demon had planted small devices throughout the canyon," Crix said, shuddering at the memory. "When I entered, she triggered them. Explosions erupted everywhere. They didn't kill me, but the dust and chaos were overwhelming. Then, she dropped onto my back. And after that?" Sarah asked, her tone teasing. "Knowing Claire, she probably tried to tame you while humming Waltzing Matilda. She spoke into some sort of device," Crix said, mandibles clicking. "Crikey, ain't she a beauty," she said. And then, the Cravanax's voice dropped, filled with mortified disbelief. "She attempted to insert her thumb into my cloaca." Sarah buried her face in her hands, her shoulders trembling with barely contained laughter. Meanwhile, Zix's expression wavered between horror and academic fascination. "I managed to throw her off, of course," Crix continued, seemingly oblivious to Sarah's reaction. "But when I turned to deliver the finishing blow, she was gone, completely vanished. Then something struck me from above, a scalding liquid." "Let me guess," Sarah said, barely holding back a grin. "About room temperature, dark brown, smelled a bit like roasted beans?" "It burned, not like acid, but..." Crix paused, visibly shaken. "But coffee," Sarah nodded knowingly. "Claire's never without her thermos. She probably weaponized it on the spot." While I was disoriented, Crix went on, "She used some kind of primitive chemical spray. It struck my eyes, blinding me." "Pepper spray," Sarah explained. "Standard issue for survey teams. Mostly for bears." "Bears?" Zix asked, tilting his head. "I'll explain later," Sarah said quickly. "Go on, Crix." "I was blinded, in agony, and then something hard struck the back of my knees. Collapsed. That's when she..." Crix hesitated, his mandibles clicking nervously. "She started singing about a billy bong and hitting me with a stick." "Her collapsible survey pole," Sarah clarified for Zix. "Made of titanium alloy. Works as a walking stick or, in Claire's case, a makeshift weapon." But Crix's voice dropped to a near whisper. "That wasn't the worst part." "Oh?" Sarah asked, leaning forward. "When I finally managed to pin her down, thinking the fight was over, she just laughed. And then she said..." Crix's scales flattened in terror. "She said, 'Cheers, mate. You kept me busy long enough. The others should be done by now.'" Sarah raised an eyebrow as she glanced at her tablet, scrolling through the report. "Ah yes, while Claire kept you occupied, the rest of her team repaired their equipment, set up defenses, and called for extraction after classifying you as hostile megafauna. They had weapons," Crix murmured, still visibly shaken. "Strange metal tubes that unleashed fire and death. And they worked together, moving like a pack of apex predators," Sarah offered with a smile. "But it's impossible," Crix wailed, his voice trembling. "You're soft, fragile, without claws or venom." "Ah, but that's where you're mistaken," Sarah replied, her grin widening. "We possess the deadliest natural weapons in the galaxy: pattern recognition, tool use, and teamwork. While you were chasing Claire, her teammates armed themselves, set up defenses, and created a perfect ambush. If she hadn't already taken you down, you would have walked right into their trap." But Crix stammered, his scales rippling in confusion. "You made several critical errors," Sarah continued, her tone taking on a lecturing quality. "First, you assumed smaller and weaker meant prey. Second, you underestimated how humans operate. We're never truly alone. Even when separated, we act as a team. Third, you disabled our tech without realizing we're not fully reliant on it. We can always resort to simpler methods, like sticks and hot coffee." "Fascinating," Zix murmured, his antennae twitching as he continued to take notes. "And your biggest mistake?" Sarah leaned forward slightly. "You assumed that because we don't look dangerous, we aren't dangerous." Sarah stood, stretching casually. "Humans didn't evolve as apex predators, Crix. We became apex predators. We're so good at it, we had to invent ethics just to level the playing field field for everything else. Crix remained silent, processing her words. Finally, he spoke in a hushed tone. The small one, when I was being loaded onto the medical transport, she patted my head and said she hadn't had that much fun since her training days. Classic Claire, Sarah chuckled. Don't worry, she doesn't hold grudges. Humans are funny like that. Try to kill us, and we might end up inviting you for a drink afterward. She turned to Zix, raising an eyebrow. So, still convinced we're a prey species? Zix's antennae twisted in frustration. I need to completely revise my species classification protocols, and I think I should notify the Galactic Science Council about updating hunting guidelines. Great idea, Sarah said, smirking. Maybe include a disclaimer. Caution, species may appear docile but are highly dangerous. Attempting to hunt them could result in significant injuries, psychological trauma, and potentially awkward social invitations afterward. As they left the medical bay, Sarah heard Crix muttering something about taking up gardening. She made a mental note to check on Claire later. Knowing her, she'd want to exchange contact details with Crix and swap hunting tales over coffee. Later that evening, as Sarah was wrapping up her incident report, a message from Claire popped up on her screen. Hey, the scaly guy made it to medical. Let them know it's all water under the bridge, but maybe suggest asking next time before they go hunting people. Also, do they drink flat whites? Asking for a friend. Sarah glanced at Zix, who was still furiously updating his classification database. Shaking her head, she typed back, I'll pass it on. P.S. You owe me coffee for this. Quick question, Sarah said, leaning back in her chair. How do you think the Galactic Council would react to a human adopting a Cravenex? The groaning creak of Zix Tal's exoskeleton was all the answer she needed. Just another day in human-alien relations, Sarah mused as she started typing a reply to Claire. Maybe she'd suggest starting with a calming herbal tea instead of coffee. No need to traumatize the poor predator any more than it already had been. Then again, knowing Claire, she'd probably already ordered a personalized mug with Galaxy's most lovable apex predator written across it. Humans, Sarah thought with a wry smile, really were the galaxy's worst paradox. Terrifying predators who preferred making friends with anything they didn't have to fight and who treated life or death combat like some kind of social bonding exercise. No wonder the rest of the galaxy struggled to understand them. She made a mental note to recommend updating Earth's galactic classification. Current status, Deathworld. You did what? Sarah stared at her tablet, completely forgetting the cup of coffee cooling beside her. Claire's holographic image appeared, practically vibrating with excitement. I invited Crix to Earth for cultural exchange, she said casually. The poor guy's been fascinated with human survival methods ever since our little adventure. Plus, you should hear the adorable chirping noise he makes when he's startled. Sarah rubbed her temples. Beside her, Zix Tal's antennae began a frantic dance of what could only be interpreted as existential dread. Claire, you can't just invite the galaxy's most dangerous apex predator to Earth. What exactly are you planning to do with him? Oh, just some light hiking in the outback. Absolutely not. Okay, fine. What about a bit of crocodile wrestling? No. Claire sighed dramatically. Fine, but I already promised to show him Grand's sheep farm in Tasmania. Did you know Cravenex have never seen sheep? They're going to love them. Sarah exchanged a weary glance with Zix, who was now emitting a sound reminiscent of a boiling kettle. Claire, do you remember what happened last time you brought an alien species into contact with Earth wildlife? The kangaroo thing wasn't my fault. How was I supposed to know it could jump that high when startled? The diplomatic fallout lasted 3 months. Claire, 3 months? Yeah, but Ambassador Zerp loved the boxing gloves I sent as an apology. Now he has a healthy respect for marsupials. Claire's grin could have powered a starship. Besides, Crix is different. He's been diving deep into human culture since our little chase. Did you know he's taken up jogging? Sarah blinked. Jogging? Yep, says it's helping him understand persistence hunting better, though he keeps grumbling about only having 6 legs. Apparently, our bipedal gait is unervingly efficient or something. Zix finally found his voice, though it wavered with disbelief. Cravenex are ambush predators. They're built for quick, devastating attacks, not endurance activities. Their entire biology rejects the concept of long-distance exertion. Well, not anymore, Claire said brightly. Crix even started a blog, From Apex to Athlete, a predator's journey into human culture. It's trending in the galactic core. Some of the other Cravenex are calling him a heretic, though. Sarah took a long sip of her cold coffee, staring at Claire's hologram. She wasn't sure if she should laugh, cry, or resign herself to the inevitable chaos. Claire, my dear, brilliant Claire, are you seriously telling me that not only have you befriended the apex predator that tried to hunt you, but you've also accidentally ignited a cultural revolution within their species? Oh no, the revolution wasn't planned. planned. That part just kind of happened. The friendship? Totally deliberate. Did you know they've never experienced hot chocolate? Can you imagine a life without hot chocolate? It's heartbreaking. Claire, focus. What exactly are you planning to do with Crix on Earth? Well, like I said, we're starting with my grand's farm. After that, I thought we'd do a little biome tour, show them how humans adapted to all sorts of environments. Crix is really fascinated by how we managed to become apex predators everywhere. And you don't see any potential issues with this plan? None at all. The Xenical Exchange Board already approved it. They're actually pretty excited. Apparently, Crix is the first Cravenax cultural ambassador. They did make me promise not to repeat the Sydney Opera House incident. Though, what's Sydney Opera House incident? Oh, nothing important. Claire waved a hand dismissively. More importantly, Crix has been taking lessons in human social customs. They're surprisingly good at tea ceremonies now. We did have a little hiccup about the difference between green tea and antifreeze, but that was an honest mistake. Could have happened to anyone. Sarah glanced at Zix, who looked like he was trying to evaporate from sheer anxiety. Are you absolutely sure this is a good idea? Sarah, my ever-so-cautious scientific friend, when have my ideas ever gone wrong? Would you like that question answered alphabetically or in chronological order? Details. Claire waved her off. Oh, did I mention Crix has taken up knitting? They're making me a sweater with 6 arms, though the sleeves are a bit excessive. It has 16 of them so far. Sarah massaged her temples. Claire, also, they've come up with this fascinating theory about human pack bonding. They think our habit of befriending potentially dangerous creatures is an evolutionary survival strategy, converting threats into allies through the strategic application of kindness. They're even writing a paper about it. A paper? Yeah. It's called The Human Paradox, Apex Predators Through Friendship. It's actually quite insightful. They're trying to figure out why we keep small predators in our homes and call them kitty. Zix, who had been quietly spiraling into an existential crisis, suddenly perked up. Wait, you deliberately incorporate smaller predators into your social units? Oh boy, Sarah muttered under her breath. Of course, Claire beamed. Want to see a picture of my cat? Her name is Lieutenant Whiskers, and she's just the cutest little murder machine, though there was that time Lieutenant Whiskers tried to eat Crix's lunch. Apparently, prolonged human interaction suppresses the Cravenax appetite. Who would have guessed? Sarah watched in resigned amusement as Claire began showing Zix what seemed to be an endless stream of cat photos, each accompanied by increasingly detailed explanations of why humans find small, predatory behavior endearing when it comes from fluffy creatures. Zix's antennae were now vibrating so rapidly they looked ready to launch him into orbit. And that's why I believe Crix would be an excellent candidate for our cross-species socialization study, Claire concluded with a triumphant grin. Oh, and they've asked if they can bring their knitting circle along. Apparently, a few other Cravenax have taken up fiber arts to better understand human tool use. They're calling it predatory crafting. Sarah glanced at her empty coffee cup, then at Claire's eager expression, and finally at Zix, who looked like he was experiencing his own personal existential meltdown. Fine, Sarah said with a sigh. But if this turns into another great emu incident, you're explaining it to the Galactic Council yourself. You're the best. Claire's hologram practically bounced with excitement. Oh, one tiny thing. What now? Sarah asked warily. Crix might have adopted 3 sheep via vidcall. They've named them Prey Practice, Fluffy Vengeance, and Steve. They're still working on human naming conventions. As Claire's hologram winked out, Sarah turned to Zix, who was clutching his notes as if they could protect him from the chaos. So, want to help me update the Galactic Species database again? What could we possibly add to the human entry now? Zix chittered weakly. Warning, Sarah deadpanned. May rehabilitate apex predators through excessive friendship, craft projects, and questionable naming practices. Approach with caution and possibly knitting needles. Somewhere in the galaxy, a former hunt master sat diligently practicing pearl stitches, pondering how their life had taken such a turn. They weren't sure how they'd gone from apex predator to enthusiastic crafter, but the sweater they were knitting now had 19 sleeves, and progress was being made. After all, if you can't defeat humans, you might as well join their knitting circle. 3 months later, Sarah received yet another message from Claire. Quick update. How do you feel about starting a multi-species rugby league? Crix thinks they've cracked the code on why humans use recreational violence for bonding. Also, Lieutenant Whiskers has officially adopted the entire knitting circle. Should I be worried that my cat is leading a group of reformed apex apex predators? Sarah didn't bother responding. Instead, she opened the Galactic Species database and updated the human entry once more. Warning: prolonged human interaction may result in hobby acquisition, existential reflection, unexpected alliances, and a newfound passion for crafting. Handle with care and possibly yarn. In severe cases, may result in complete behavioral reformation and/or adoption by Earth felines. Approach with caution or cookies. Results not guaranteed. The 7th meeting of PAA, Predators Anonymous, was underway. Inside a spacious room, arranged in a neat circle, sat 6 Cravenacs, 3 VX Crystal Stalkers, a tunnel worm, and, remarkably, a compressed version of what appeared to be an atmospheric Leviathan, accommodated by some very creative spatial folding technology. Crix stood at the front, confidently adjusting their hand-knitted sweater, now sporting at least 20 sleeves. "Welcome, everyone, to Predators Anonymous," Crix said cheerfully. "Before we begin, would anyone like to share their progress this week?" One of the Crystal Stalkers raised a jagged crystalline limb. "It's been 2 weeks since my last hunt. I've taken up watercolor painting. The way the colors blend reminds me of blood, but in a calming way. Excellent progress, Crystal Death from above. Or, as you now prefer to be called, Steve," the Crystal Stalker said. "It feels less intimidating." Sarah, standing near the door, felt Zix Tall's antennae brush her shoulder. He leaned in to whisper, What are we even watching?" Sarah whispered back, "I think we've stumbled into the first ever interstellar predator rehabilitation program. Anyone else?" Crix asked, shuffling some papers with 2 limbs while another pair adjusted their sweater. The atmospheric Leviathan, somehow squeezed into the room, raised a shimmering appendage. This translator crackled to life. "I once ruled the upper atmosphere of my homeworld, spreading terror far and wide. But since meeting Claire," at the mention of Claire, the group collectively nodded in understanding, "I've discovered interpretive dance. The winds are now my stage, not my hunting grounds." "Outstanding work, Stormbringer," Crix said, all 6 eyes gleaming. "Though perhaps we should use your chosen human name?" "Call me Bob," the Leviathan said. Sarah couldn't hold back any longer and cleared her throat. Every predator in the room turned to face her in perfect synchronization. "Sorry, but what exactly is going on here?" Crix's scales rippled with enthusiasm. "Everyone, this is Sarah, one of the humans I mentioned. Sarah, meet PA, a group for apex predators exploring non-predatory activities inspired by human culture." "I see," Sarah said slowly, taking in the sight of several predators wearing brightly colored friendship bracelets. "And how exactly did this start?" "After Claire introduced me to knitting," Crix explained. "Of course it was Claire," Sarah muttered under her breath. "I realized many other apex predators could benefit from learning about humans. Did you know that before humans, none of us realized the thrill of the hunt could be replicated through competitive baking?" A tunnel worm nodded vigorously, its massive body draped in a kiss the cook apron. "My soufflés are legendary. They used to be lethal. Now they just win blue ribbons at the Galactic Bake-Off, right?" Sarah said, finally stepping into the room. Behind her, Zix followed, his exoskeleton creaking audibly as he struggled to process what he was seeing. "So, everyone here is retired predators?" Sarah asked. "Oh no," Crix corrected with a wide, toothy grin. "We're still apex predators." "Of course you are," Sarah sighed. "We're just broadening our horizons, exploring hobbies and finding constructive ways to channel our predatory instincts. Have you heard about something humans call extreme sports? It's like hunting, but the only thing you're chasing is yourself." "I've taken up skateboarding," announced one of the VX Crystal Stalkers proudly. "The humans call me Radical Dave now." Sarah sank heavily into the nearest chair. "And Claire knows about all this?" "Oh, absolutely," Crix replied. "She's our honorary advisor. Though, after the paintball incident, she's been banned from attending in person." "The paintball incident? We're not supposed to talk about it," Kasak interjected quickly. "Galactic Council orders. Something about uncontrolled enthusiasm and widespread property damage. And let's just say a tea cozy is not meant to be used that way," Bob, the atmospheric Leviathan, added with an embarrassed ripple. "I'm still finding paint in places I didn't know existed, right? Moving on," Crix chirped, unfazed. "Today's focus is turning traditional territory marking into abstract art. But first, let's recite our group mantra." The predators spoke as one, their voices surprisingly harmonious. "Grant me the serenity to accept the prey I must not hunt, the courage to explore new hobbies, and the wisdom to understand that humans are insane enough to befriend anything." Sarah turned to Zix Tall, who was staring at the scene as if his entire worldview was crumbling. "Are you writing this down?" "My notes gave up and started composing free verse about existential dread 3 minutes ago," Zix replied faintly. "Next week," Crix continued with enthusiasm, "we're starting a book club. Our first reads are eat, pray, don't hunt, and zen, and the art of not eating your neighbors. And the week after that, the tunnel worm chimed in, we're doing a group pottery class. We've had to special order wheels for those of us with extra appendages. Don't forget the charity bake sale, Radical Dave added, waving a jagged limb. All proceeds go to the Predators for Peace Foundation. We're teaching young hunters there's more to life than the chase, like baking macarons. Sarah watched in stunned silence as some of the galaxy's deadliest creatures enthusiastically discussed their upcoming craft fair. Someone had even started passing around a sign-up sheet for next month's meditation retreat. Zix, she said finally, is this happening? Is this real? Zix sighed, antennae drooping. I think we're witnessing the dawn of intergalactic self-help. The atmospheric Leviathan was demonstrating its latest interpretive dance routine, which it had titled Wind Currents of Love. You know, Sarah said to Zix, watching in mild disbelief, I think it's time to update the human species classification again. What could we possibly add now? Zix asked, his voice tinged with resignation. Warning, extended interaction with humans may result in spontaneous formation of support groups, sudden artistic inclinations, and an uncontrollable desire to take up endearing hobbies. Side effects include complete lifestyle overhauls, adoption of human names, usually Steve, and inexplicable expertise in fiber crafts. Before Zix could respond, Claire's hologram materialized in the middle of the room. Hey, everyone, sorry I'm late. Oh, hi Sarah. Has Crix mentioned our plans for the Interspecies Olympics yet? We're blending traditional hunting techniques with synchronized swimming. Sarah stared at her coffee, wishing it had something stronger in it. Claire, dear, yes. Why are there 3 VX crystal stalkers outside practicing what appears to be synchronized roller skating? Oh, that's the B team, Claire said brightly. They're perfecting their routine for the showcase. We had to tweak the skates a bit for their crystalline limbs. Did you know that when they get really into a hobby, they start growing crystals shaped like sports equipment? Sarah turned to Crix. And how's that sweater project of yours coming along? Up to 23 sleeves now, Crix said proudly. I'm thinking of launching a fashion brand, Predator Chic, for the apex predator who wants to express themselves beyond their appetite. The meeting quickly descended into an impromptu crafting session. Sarah watched, half in awe, as the atmospheric Leviathan deftly crocheted a scarf. Sighing, Sarah pulled up the galactic species database and made one final update. Warning, exposure to humans may lead to apex predators reconsidering their purpose, taking up interpretive dance, and adopting human names. Rehabilitation through relentless kindness has an uncomfortably high success rate. Proceed with caution or bring craft supplies. Ideally, both. P.S. If Claire proposes any group activities, notify your nearest Galactic Council representative immediately. Knitting circles appear to be an exception. P.P.S. Why is everyone named Steve?